pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and to add my voice to over 100 years of debate on the subject of reforming the House of Lords. Indeed, the unresolved discussion on Lords reform has now been going on for so long that an annual debate on the subject must surely now be considered a parliamentary tradition. In 1908, the Queen's great-grandfather was a reigning monarch while New Zealand had just become an independent country. It was also the year in which the Rosebery Report made recommendations on how peers should be selected to the Lords. Such is the pace of change at Westminster that here we are, 110 years later, still tinkering around the edges of our bloated and unelected upper chamber. And after all that time, the proposed reforms before us today hardly seem worth the wait. This is especially the case when we consider that it would take up to 15 years to reduce the size of the Lords to 600 members. And why 600? I've read the report, and nowhere does it explain why the committee decided on 600. Did they consider how many Lords contribute to debates, committees or groups? Because some do. As was eloquently explained by our opening remarks from the honourable member from Edinburgh East, some make very valuable contributions, but 600? When the Lords debated this issue, 61 members took part. That's 61 of the 799 currently eligible peers. When the Lord Speaker Committee launched a consultation, 62 members contributed. The reduction from 826 peers is undoubtedly progress, but we are merely reducing the size of the problem. We are not solving it. Just to underscore the timid nature of these proposals, new members of the Lords would still have a guaranteed position for 15 years. We would retain hereditary peers, 92. We would retain Lord Spiritual, 26 archbishops and bishops. We would retain the royal office holders, Earl Marshal and the Lord Great Chamberlain. And of course, reducing the peers to 600 but protecting the hereditary and spiritual peers means they would make up a greater proportion of the unelected House. I ask members, are you happy to go out to your constituency and argue in favour of an upper house of unelected appointees with 15-year terms? A house that has no mechanism for the public to hold its members to account, a house that has the ability or suitability of its members is completely out with the control of the electorate. Would you be happy to speak with constituents face to face and tell them our modern Parliament should include unelected bishops and hereditary peers, who are the heirs of long-forgotten generals, admirals and land-owning aristocracy? And where is the progress towards a balanced House, by gender, by geography, by religion? How do we know that minorities are represented? We don't, and we won't, because the remit for this committee only asked them to address the size of the House. I acknowledge the good work done by this committee, but they had their hands tied before they even started to write. Here we are skirting around the issue and ignoring the core question of whether or not we should even have an unelected chamber. And what does that say about the nature of Westminster? The mother of parliaments has spawned so many legislatures around the world, many of whom have long overtaken us in their ability to reform and adapt to the changed needs of their political systems. Westminster, on the other hand, limply staggers on without any of the energy or imagination that characterises other parliaments. The build... Certainly.
Just on that point, I think, again, you've heard comments from my side where we are for reform. But I think characterising Westminster as something that limply goes on with no energy. This is the Parliament that brought in the NHS. This is the Parliament that's brought in hundreds of technological innovations. They've spawned justice systems around the world. Westminster has led the world in so many innovations. So I think to say that our Parliament is without energy and limply staggers on, I think is unfair.
And the honourable member makes my point absolutely perfectly. The NHS. When did we introduce the NHS? It was 1950s. This is 2017, last time I checked. The buildings that make up this Parliament are themselves reflective of what is happening here. They are rotten and crumbling. According to a headline in The Guardian, Parliament's building risks catastrophic failure without urgent repairs. It's estimated that the final repair bill will be more than £3.5 billion. We know, however, that the problems facing this place are deeper than crumbling masonry and decaying stonework. The institutions themselves are in need of urgent repair. Some with another opportunity to genuinely reform the House of Lords, with another opportunity to genuinely reform the House of Lords, We have decided instead to paper over the cracks. A century of debates like this one are about deciding what colour and pattern that paper will be, yet the cracks remain underneath. Limiting the length of terms, reducing the size of the chamber and minimising the number of appointments that the Prime Minister can make do represent progress, but it's the smallest possible first steps towards reforming the Lords into a chamber fit for 21st century democracy. Lord Burns said that these proposals are a radical yet achievable solution to the excessive size of the Lords. With respect to Lord Burns and the Lord Speaker's Committee, these proposals are not radical and they will only reinforce public anger and scepticism of Westminster's politics. Most people will simply look at this situation and see a Committee of Lords concluding that the privileged position of other peers should be more or less protected. I know that there are members from all sides of this House that want genuine reform, but let's be realistic. The UK Government has no authority. It is barely surviving. While the country moves steadily closer to a Brexit cliff edge, Parliament has neither the time nor political energy to tackle Lords reform when so much else is happening. Meanwhile, people in my constituency of Inverclyde and across Scotland will look at Lords reform as just another example of this Parliament's inability to change. They may soon decide that the powers resting here may be better placed in a unicameral Parliament, and that Parliament is in Edinburgh.
Order. There are three